can gauge some of that, of course, but I think if we have it in a more systematic way, we can say there is a need, let's use this data to be able to get some funding so we can have extra resources. So certainly that's my take on this, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
And I want to add to that. I mean, one of the reasons, I mean, we do have a policy regarding administering student surveys.
Right.
And so there's a whole series of criteria we have to go through. Also, I mean, from personal experience in my previous districts, being urban districts, there were always so many people lined up who wanted to survey the kids for one reason or another. And we became very protective of our students and how that data was used, and also the time taken away from instruction. And, you know, and after meeting and going through and getting the information and the assurances of how the data is going to be protected, that it is anonymous, that, and one of the reasons why Dr. Paiva has to go to school committees for approval is because some of the questions are, it doesn't hold back any punches. And, you know, so there are things that we might consider from a question level that maybe we don't have that one included. Ideally, we don't dilute the questions or the data, but there are considerations. However, from a data use and privacy, I think this is a good thing.
Let me just procedurally let the record reflect Mr. Connell's here. Anybody have any questions?
So the document that we were given, these are all of the questions that would be asked?
Those are all of the questions, yes. They are presented in a little different format because it's an online survey. So we actually organize it by substance. So students actually won't see all of those, because if, say, you've never tried alcohol, we don't go on to ask you all those alcohol questions. So skip logic is in there. It also really cuts down on how long it takes for the students to actually participate.
So they'll be taking it online via their Chromebooks, I take it?
That's how we do it with most districts. So.
And there's no tracing back to the...
Nope.
No.
I've disabled, so they are in most of these survey software that are available. You can track IP addresses, but I have to turn that off because of our own internal ethical stuff that we've provided.
Even if IP addresses were carried, it doesn't. It's not static. It's not fixed to that Chromebook. IP addresses are just,
they change.
You know, delivered as needed.
Okay.
So.
Because I was just curious, in the event that there is perhaps maybe a child reaching out for help in using this format.
This is not the tool for that.
I know, but there's
No, but we have other tools and
but at least
mechanisms
it could be
for that.
alerted.
Yeah, so typically we don't have that capability since it is anonymous to be able to track for that. There are just the four, well really there's 3 suicide questions in there, thinking about have you made an attempt in those. But generally we find, you know, we do see a significant amount that have thought about it across all districts, which is exactly why we have it included in there.
And I was a little bit unclear when you were explaining who gets the data. So is it you're keeping the data? It's not
Yes.
being shared?
So I get all of the
Externally with
individual
other
data,
vendors.
right? So the only people that it's shared with, well, BHDDH, which is the
Blackstone Valley
that's
Prevention
the
Coalition.
The
Right.
coalition.
So the coalition doesn't get the actual data at all. Everything that's reported or given to anyone is an aggregate report. Like, so they may get information like Blackstone Valley, Lisa Carsafair is the regional coordinator. She will get like the North Smithfield, each of the schools. They don't get the raw data. The only people that have the raw data is myself, as well as BHDDH, is actually the Department of Behavioral Health and Disabilities. They have access to our level of data, but they have the same, they cannot share it. Especially when it comes down to, often, I'm very protective of the fact that, especially in a town like ours, we don't have a ton of diversity. So we would never cross like a demographic question with use, because they're actually in our town, you may be able to identify those students. So we're very careful not to cross those at all, pretty much ever.
And so by participating in this, you mentioned there's grant money available, and how exactly does that work? So, and who would be writing our
Right.
grants?
So typically, it's someone like Pam Scher. I think you've met her in the past. She's the local coordinator, and I've seen that she's been involved in a lot of things. She runs the prevention task force and those kind of things. She would be in charge of writing the grants. The data that she would request would come from me as a statistician. They basically say, this grant is requiring this information. They want to show, say it's one that focuses on alcohol. We have to show that, yes, we actually have students who've experimented or use, or maybe even use in a risky way. So we, again, provide that in aggregate form.
Is that something that we have to ask for, or will that be volunteered to us?
The grant. So Pam and Lisa Carcefaro, both of the prevention people, have said multiple times, like, when I was new to all of this, I sort of said, well, how does this work? Like, why does Lincoln have this and Portsmouth have this? And they said, well, they have some data, and we wrote some grants. Like, they actually got a 10-year, a bunch of communities have gotten these 10-year drug-free communities grants that really, it's a lot of money. I don't know the exact amount, but it can fund lots of stuff for 10 years. I know in another town I'm working on a vaping diversion program that's falling under that, like creating an individual-based vaping program for anyone that's been caught in that high school. So that way they're not just getting suspended or in-house suspension, they're actually getting some help for it, for the addiction, as well as for some of the reasons why they're doing it. So grants funded in like that can actually fund a whole host of different things. So
Because a lot of this falls under the Blackstone Valley Prevention Coalition.
Yes.
Now we can plug into regional grants,
The regional
initiatives, which, to be honest, North Smithfield on its own is not really a grant magnet. But part of a region,
Right.
We would do much better.
Yeah, exactly. Being part of a region, and as well as having, I think Pam has a lot of experience with grant writing and the ability to really bring other people on board that have successfully completed some grants and been able to be awarded that. So she's doing some really good things in other towns as well. And for myself, like I had spoken before about, is that sort of being more invested in a different level, not sort of my professional world. I'm very interested in making those happen. And given my relationship with the survey and with the prevention coalitions, I'm happy to sort of take that data, help them to make sure those grant funding opportunities get applied for, and we can really move forward with that.
So if you approve this tonight, we can move forward with the survey. There is an opt-out
Yes.
ability,
There is an
and
opt-out.
so we have to get the information out to the parents of the students who will be taking the survey. Let them know what it is, what's in it. Give them the opportunity to opt out, so we can gather that. And so when it comes time to deliver the assessment, the survey, it's going to the right kids at the right time, and.
Yeah, and the way that typically works is we have an opt-out form that we've created that's very clear, so parents know what they're opting out of, and if they want to. I've had some parents ask for the actual survey, which we've provided. Usually, if you're one to opt out, you kind of just want to opt out regardless of the exact questions, but sometimes parents like to see it. And so we make sure that those are administered in each of the schools, and then when those come back, we like to have a count, make sure we see. I like to know across every community exactly how many parents are opting out, which on the whole, pretty small, although you can predict certain communities much more than others. But we've been tracking that more. And then we have somebody, my project manager will talk to a contact person in the high school and middle school, depending on what grade you decide you wanted to survey. And we work with that contact person to we guide the way that we typically do it, give some suggestions, and work with that person to get it scheduled. Usually we get it done in one day, and then it's done.
What are the costs?
I'm sorry?
What are the costs involved?
No, nothing.
Do we have a contract with you? Would we have a contract with you?
Not for this, no.
So I know that you mentioned what the data would be used for, et cetera, et cetera. How can we assure parents that that's what it's going to be used for?
I don't know beyond my word and other people's word. This is Rhode approved, so I don't know if that holds any weight.
So I'm actually the project manager of SurveyWorks.
Oh, there we
At the
go.
Rhode Island Department of Education. So
On our off years.
many of the questions when we originally did SurveyWorks, we had to have an opt-out because we asked a lot of the questions that now the Rhode Island Student Survey
Yes,
asks.
we've been collaborating.
And the Department of Education came to an agreement at one time that this is really about learning in schools. That's where our niche is. And so the questions about depression and drugs and cigarettes all went over to the Rhode Island Student Survey, and this became a state agency collaboration.
Yes.
So the Department of Health has their own survey that goes out, which is more sampling, so we haven't happened to see that recently.
Yeah.
But they've got a survey as well. I mean, so.
Yeah, they have the YRBS.
They have the YRBS.
YRBS is Youth Risk Behavioral Survey, and it's administered on the off years from the Rhode Island Student Survey. But like you mentioned, it's sampling, meaning like here, if we reach out to the middle and high school students, we have the ability to say, and our goal is always to reach 60% of the grade or more, because then it's more valid. Whereas the sampling techniques of like the YRBS, they just sample a very small portion.
And it's a
of
statewide
schools.
number.
And it's statewide, everything's aggregated.
So what we've worked is actually with all of the state agencies to kind of say, all right, here's like the only piece we kept was the depression question.
Yes.
But we've worked with,
Yeah.
to be able
Buddha,
to
I always say
make
Buddha.
sure, I know, because I can't.
I know, me
Behavioral
too.
health something.
Yeah, it's
But all those agencies, and it's a state,
state collaboration.
yeah, I mean, it's really about being able to get grants, and some of it is federal reporting that needs to be.
Yes,
done.
and so like for the
These
student
agencies have-
student assistance counselor, the grant that a student assistant counselor, the money basically that funds the student assistance counselor requires some of this information. So that was originally sort of the impetus, like, okay, this would be great to do it this year. And then just looking at other opportunities. But yeah, we have been collaborating. I've met a few times up at Rhode, sort of us pulling up with Megan, right? Trying to pull apart what should be asked, what shouldn't. So, and we've added in, obviously, as you can imagine, this year, we've added in a lot about the vaping and some other things about driving under the influence, not just of alcohol, because we know that that is happening. So, but, you know, as far as being able to say to parents, it's not going to get shared. I mean, we're pretty diligent about that. So my own role as a researcher, I go through it. You know, we have a human subjects review board for every grant that I ever work on, and we abide by every single one of those rules with this.
And do you have suppression rules?
I'm sorry?
Do you have suppression
Yes.
rules?
So should any cells be under, well, usually we say under 10. We don't even report that.
Right, so that's the same, anything at the Department of Education, if it's less than 10, the denominator is less than 10, potentially it's identifiable, even
So we will
it's
not
still
report
really
it.
hard to be identifiable.
It would be very hard.
But it would be suppressed.
And it may be worth, Mr. Chairman, if, you know, if you need, I'm sure there is a data use agreement for the organization and between organizations that would govern.
So you know, when you have a credit card, every year they send you a letter saying, this is the information we keep, this is what the information is used for. Do you have any information? I mean, even if it's just a statement of.
Yeah, I can generate a statement that talks about that. We don't typically have that. We haven't been asked for that in the past, but it's something to really think about, because I think typically other grants, I'm usually working on federally funded grants. This is a state contract that I work on, but most of the time we do have that already in place.
But I can see that when these questionnaires go out, that questions are going to arise as to what's going on with the information, who has it, and if it's personally identifiable. I would, if there was any way possible that was personally identifiable, even to you, because a subpoena would get that information.
Literally
It's-
impossible.
it's impossible.
It's
So-
an anonymous search.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so, you know, obviously I'm comfortable with that, but I think that the question will arise as to what the information will be used for. We can say what you said, but if we had a written document, we could point to it. That's
Yes.
what I'm asking.
Yeah, and I think that's actually, now that you mention it's probably, I'm actually surprised that other communities haven't asked for that in writing. I think we've talked about it, but that's a great addition to it.
Anybody?
So I had a few more. So it's my understanding the state Rhode does a survey that's mandatory, right?
It is not mandatory.
No.
So not all the districts have to participate?
No, all the districts participate, but we don't say take it or else.
Okay.
We encourage people to take it because we want to give data back to schools and
Right.
districts.
And that's every other year.
That's every year.
And yours will be running on the opposite.
Will
on the
you
not
run it
on the
every
off-
year?
No, we run every year.
Yeah, survey works every year.
The only thing I would want to be sure is that we
Done at the same
communicate in a
time.
Yes,
smart
absolutely.
way
Yeah.
that just says, don't confuse this with survey works.
Absolutely.
Right?
So every other year they'll be doing two.
Yes.
Right.
Well,
At the
I don't know,
Midwest.
they don't, we don't participate in YRDS, I'm assuming, right? So it would be every other year. right?
So the one that you're representing,
Yes.
you mentioned you're under a state contract?
So personally, I'm a state that's how my involvement. So I'm a professor at URI, but they hired me for just the administration piece as well as the data management. and-
I'm just curious, I guess the question, the underlying question I'm getting at is this something that's going to be around for a while?
So it's been run for, I think this is the 6th or 7th time. I've been in charge of it in 2016, 2018, and now. I can never say for sure, but because things have dramatically changed, it used to be a paper survey with very poor response rate, lots of messy data that took a long time to do. I've sort of restructured the administration, and the last few administrations have gone really well, getting over 60% of almost every school, even at the grade level, participating. Just really important for us to not get just short, small, what's the point of getting 20% of a grade, very select sample. So I envision it going on for a long time. And like you mentioned, it's something that's used for multiple sources, multiple reasons. So I imagine it will continue. And that's really the key, is being able to track it over time as well, because then we can actually show that if things are implemented in between and grants are funded and we get to have different opportunities in the schools, that we can actually show some real change. That's why we also say to survey a few grades instead of just 1 or 2 grades, because sometimes the effects of programs and interventions and even things that people don't think about as prevention, sports related things, arts and other opportunities, they've had some really great success. And I was talking about this, a lot of times we're talking and thinking more about substance use, but body image. There are some really great programs being developed around those topics too, which we know impact mental health, impact bullying, which we had some questions about cyberbullying, which of course, being a parent of 4 kids between 10 and 17, the number of things that I hear, which my son is not very quiet. My daughters are pretty quiet, pretty keep to themselves, but even they'll say, this person is struggling with this, and so I think all the support and additional things will really help with that.
So is this something that we have to approve every other year for you? It's not something
Yes.
that we can say, yes, we want to participate?
Well, right, so it's great if you say this is your go, it makes it easier every other year, but Rhode does make us get the superintendent form signed and the school committee form signed, especially because sometimes we do tweak the questions, so we like every year, every time we administer it, to say, these are the new additions. What I find is sometimes when we go to a school committee who's consistently done this over and over again, most of the time it's sort of a wash, and it's great, but we'll say, hey, we've included these things, we want to alert you to that. And often people just want to know that. So it's gone on for quite a while, and I envision that we'll continue doing it for quite some time.
Okay, good.
Anyone have any questions?
These topics are so timely in today's society, which is such a shame. I think whatever information we can gather will be extremely helpful.
Great. Yeah, I know, and again, I keep saying it, but I go to a lot of school committee meetings. It's very easy for me to say my spiel, and I never get choked up like that really, but I think just having more of a connection here and being able to see some really great things that have been going on, and And it's really sad for me sometimes when I look at the data, because I'm like, it's just astounding to me that kids are struggling with this. But we see that, and we know what we can do to help. So I think us sort of getting on board in that way. And like Mr. St. Jean said, some of these other communities sort of have people chomping at the bit to come in and let's survey you, let's get you involved in this, we want to do this intervention. And we don't always see that because people kind of, we're small and not as diverse as some of those. But although I think our definition of diversity is really changing, and I think we do have more diversity than we think of when it comes to things other than race and background. So I think it's important for us to start thinking about it in that way.
And this is going to be required to be taken in the school, not as a take-home assignment.
It'll be in school.
Yeah. We had one community do it, sort of sent the link out a few years ago in 2016, and students completed it on their phone. As you can imagine, not many people did it. So we've definitely made it so we can organize it as a one day in school. Especially here, we have Chromebooks, although a lot of communities do, so it tends to work out well.
So what are you planning to administer?
So we can administer anytime from February. Typically, we find schools prefer to wait till after February vacation just because of Christmas and, coming back from all the holidays. Anywhere after February vacation, all the way up until May, end of May.
So if I have my preferences, so
Yeah,
not
what-
to get it confused.
So we don't overlap. What would you
January
recommend?
15th through March 31st.
Right,
Yeah.
so we're perfectly happy doing it after that. Actually, a lot of communities have done that. Sometimes some schools even have their own internal surveys, so they prefer to do those things earlier and then we go later. And I try from administration to administration to kind of keep the time frame pretty similar, so that would be helpful because if we did it, say, beginning of May or something, then we can consistently do that.